The Florida State Seminoles have added a defensive line recruit, and we got to talk about quarterback recruit Jaden O'Neal.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. The Florida State Seminoles have picked up James Carrington, defensive lineman out of Crean Lutheran in Irvine, California, just outside of Los Angeles, for the class of 2026. Going to break down what I liked about his film, how Tony White and everybody else on the Florida State defensive staff can utilize this versatile player, and why I dislike how Florida State has recruited D-line despite all the turmoil at FSU over the last year. It's a little bit better than what they've been given credit for, and we're going to talk about it right here on Locked On Seminoles. And to finish off the show, I had the opportunity to speak with John Williams of Locked On Sooners. Of course, that's the program where Jaden O'Neal is committed, the quarterback who also happens to be finishing up his official visit to Florida State. Where do the Sooners stand with him? Where does O'Neal stand with Oklahoma? Does Florida State have a great chance to flip him? We're going to discuss that on today's show. But let's start off with the commitment. James Carrington is a athletic kid, 6'1", 6'2", 250 range, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But he has a lot of attributes that I like, especially because of how Tony White uses his defense. Will Florida State be able to use him in multiple spots? Does he have a specific role? These are some of the questions I'm going to talk about. But first, I want to go over his film. These are just some of the highlights that I like from it. And he last year played for Bishop Gorman, so he's a kid very familiar with top-end competition. A few of his highlights that I really liked were actually against Mater Dei, and all their linemen are going to play college football in some capacity. So keep the following in perspective. He's not running over kids that are mediocre. He played at Bishop Gorman. So Carrington understands football, and he knows what it's like to grind at that program. Upper body power. That's the first thing that I noticed about him consistently from rep to rep to rep. He's not the biggest guy yet, and he's still going to fill out. But Carrington, again, 6'1", 6'2", 250, give or take. That's a young man that has upper body power that's just natural. Kind of like farm boy strength. You see those guys throwing around bales of hay. He's the guy that would be good at that. He puts his hands into an offensive lineman who weighs 50, 70 pounds more than him. He still pushes him back. And because he's a little bit shorter, he's actually got an edge. He gets leverage. He's charging up with his hands. It's pretty interesting. I liked his ability to bull rush, gain just a little bit of angle right or left, and then he would slide under with a rip move, something basic, and get by the offensive lineman and head towards the ball carrier, the quarterback. It was pretty simple, but very effective over and over again. I really like his power. He also stays active. Sometimes you get blocked. Sometimes the offensive lineman wins, at least the first part of the rep. He uses his hands for secondary moves, whether it's a swipe, whether it's a rip, whatever it may be, and he gets after the play all the way through. Guys that play with high motors, that use their hands well as defensive linemen, they've got a better chance. Now, I'm not saying he's anyway near complete product, but Carrington's a kid that plays super hard and is just determined to make a play. You can't teach that. I really like that about his film. Sheer effort overall. There were plays where they would run like outside zone, some basic play to the perimeter away from wherever he lined up. And for the record, he moves around a lot. 3-tech outside, 5-tech, 7-tech. He's all over the place. So this is a guy that's got versatility, and I'll get to that in a second. But no matter where he lined up, if the ball went away from him, Carrington was very consistent on chasing it down. Much like the other point I just made with the secondary move, this is the same concept. Effort. Nick Saban talked about it more than anything else in his press conferences. Bowden used to talk about it. Elite coaches understand. You can recruit the talent, but do you maximize it? Do you get the most out of them? This kid's probably going to give you about as good an effort as you're going to really want. The question is, where do you play him? And again, we'll talk about that in a second. The final point was something I was a little bit surprised by. There were a few plays against Modern Day and some of the other schools that he went up against. When it's a pass play, it's one thing because you're trying to penetrate, get to the quarterback. But run blocking, he's not as easy to mow over for some 300-pound lineman like I thought he would. Stout, stays low, gets in his stance, comes out, doesn't just stand up and make himself an easy target to hit his chest. He gets after it with his hands, with his hips, and he uses his hands to try to get to a point where he can at least just kind of clog the middle. There was a play where he got double teamed. He certainly wasn't going to get by two guys with Modern Day, but he still clogged the middle. You'll take that every time as a D-line coach. If a really good team you're going against doubles your interior defensive lineman, and on that play he was at 3 tech, I believe. That's the kind of situation where you get a win, second and long, every time. He may not make the tackle, but in hindsight, he's the reason that the players around him in a team game, football is the ultimate team sport, that they made the play. He's been coached. Again, he was at Bishop Gorman last year, so that's kind of self-explanatory. Crean Lutheran's going to be very, very happy with him, I have a feeling, with how he chases the football, with how he gives effort, even when he's double-teamed, doesn't give up, all those things. The only question with him, with the stuff I'm talking about now, is does he add more moves before the end of his senior year, before he gets to Florida State, to come in and play maybe a specific role as a freshman? But we'll talk about versatility now too. 3 tech, 5 tech, 7 tech. He can play any of that stuff depending on what scheme you run. And this is where it gets very, very convoluted. FSU's probably going to run multiple fronts as long as Coach White is running the defense. That's my projection based on his history. We'll see. And until they get 5-6 games into this season, we won't know. But I'm guessing he's going to adapt his schemes to the personnel he has. Now, this year he's got Big Darrell in the middle. It's a one-shot deal. He's going to play nose guard at least part of the time. You can't teach 6'6", 335 in that athletic. One-shot deal. So what we see this year may not be anywhere near what they get in 26, 27, and on, because Darrell's about as rare a player as you're going to see from a body type and athleticism standpoint in college football. He will do well at the NFL Combine. But this is a kid you can move around. 3rd and 8, 3rd and 6. Do you play him at edge? Do they know where he's going to be? Do you know how you want to block him if he's having a good game? He can move around. Is it going to be in a 3-man line? Is it going to be in a 4-man line? Edge to Florida State. This is why I like to pick more than some other people. Him coming to Florida State, I think he can be utilized in ways that maybe some people don't really understand, but it's about technique and scheme once you get to the elite level. Everybody gets good defensive linemen. This kid's shown the effort to be good. He's shown some hand use and definitely a lot of versatility and just overall getting after it, even if the ball goes away from him. Things that you can't, quote unquote, teach, he has. And he's also, again, technique's not too bad for his age. I think Pot Roast, Coach White, and everybody at the Florida State program will enjoy having him because that's a kid that you can mold into a difference maker on money down, 3rd down. 3rd down is everything. Florida State has a chance with him to be that guy. I think he's not necessarily going to be a 10-sack player, but on 3rd and 6, he can be the guy that chases down the mobile quarterback. On 3rd down and 8, put him in front of an offensive guard and they let him go one-on-one. Good luck to the quarterback. We'll still have to see how big he gets, how much his frame develops. I understand all that. He could end up being 260, 270 and being done, but maybe he gets a little bigger and he plays inside a little more. Goal line, then you play him at end sometimes, short yardage. All in all, love the effort. He's got versatility in his game. In Florida State D-line recruiting, it's been a little underrated. We've talked about it somewhat Locked On Seminoles, but this is another great example. When we come back, I'm going to talk about a few more questions I have about Carrington and how Florida State can use him. Then we're also going to talk about Jaden O'Neal and Florida State quarterback recruiting. The NBA Finals are here. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, and everything that's going on to make the fans lose their mind. The atmosphere has been great in all 4 games. Now, the Pacers have to travel to Oklahoma City to see if they can steal a game. That experience is going to be pretty crazy. I have a feeling that fan base in Oklahoma City, they're going to be live, absolutely, from the start of that game all the way through. And Game Time can help you be a part of it if you want to. There's no surprise fees with the Game Time app. You get panoramic seat views. It's really cool to use the Game Time app. And for me, it's just very convenient because it's so fast. In a couple of clicks, you can be in a situation where you can see your seat view, you can see your price right from your phone. So Game Time makes it very easy to use, and you don't have to go to just NBA games. You could go to MLB, you could go to a concert, or just about any other kind of event. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to get all your latest Noles information. And today we're talking about James Carrington first and foremost. I want to finish up on him on a few questions, then hop over to my conversation that I had with John Williams of Locked On Sooners, talking about their effort to get Bo Bentley. Does Jaden O'Neal stay in the class? We'll get to that here in about 5 minutes. But first, here are the questions that I had when I look at it from, if I was a coach at Florida State, these are the things that would go through my mind. Why are we recruiting this kid? How's he going to help us? Is this going to be something that's fluid? Where is the circumstance at? So here's my first question. How will height impact Carrington's performance, especially against bigger offensive linemen? Now, I talked about this briefly during the first part of the show, but I saw him use good leverage. I'm not saying he's Aaron Donald, who's roughly 6'1", 6'2", but I'm just saying he uses leverage. And when you get up underneath somebody's shoulder pads, even if they're 6'7", 335, they're not using their power to go down very well. It's easier to go up. So I believe that he's going to be okay when they use him on the interior. Just don't want to use him on 3rd and 1 necessarily there, unless you're just going to let him go one gap and go. Is he going to stonewall 335 guys consistently? Probably not. But it also depends on how big James Carrington will become. Number 2, inside or a swing player. I think he's going to play inside at least part of the time. If he's 250 or more now, the way that Carrington is built, and they call him Tank, again, big chest, super strong guy. I could see him being the 6'1.5", 280-pound defensive tackle that's super annoying, kind of a Corey Simon type back in the day, for those of you that remember Florida State from the 90s, like that kind of player, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we'll see if he ends up being a player that's going to be on the edge part of the time. I could see it for short yardage, and that may develop over time as he gains more weight. He may start at D end and end up at D tackle. Number 3, how big do I think he will become? Again, I'm guessing 280, but it's not out of the question because this is hard to predict. What is the young man comfortable with carrying? Florida State might project something with him, discuss it with him. Hey, let's see if you can handle 290. It's possible. That way he could play nose guard part of the time, move him around even more, but it may not happen. It depends on what his sense is of his body, if he's going to be comfortable with it. These are the kind of questions that help determine whether you take a kid, whether you can bring him in for a visit. Florida State might have had conversations with Tank about this. I don't know. But his body type is very unique, and how much he weighs by, let's say, the end of his second year will dictate a lot about where he ends up playing from down to down. Next, is he more comfortable in a 3-man or 4-man line? This is the most complex of the questions, and only Carrington's going to be able to determine that. If they're going to play him on the edge, whether it's stand up and like a 50 or a double eagle look, Georgia runs that sometimes. His freshman year, maybe I could see that, but more likely he's going to be a hand in the dirt, strong side end to 3 tech as a freshman. That's my guess. But this is one of the hardest projections that I've done for a specific position of any player in the last few years. Not just because I cover Florida State, but like Carrington has moved around. He's played for some really good programs. It's not an easy eval. It's fun. It's exciting. But then you also have to put the cherry on top. Florida State runs multiple fronts. So at some point, if he wants to play a lot, he will most likely have to adapt. but which one is he more comfortable with early on, and how does that play into Florida State? We're just going to have to see, because part of that's the other players around him. Again, I think Coach White, Pot Roast, and everybody else on the staff, they'll adjust to the talent year to year. Like this year, again, they got Big Darryl. You can run more three-man. Darryl's a house. When he's gone, you're going to have to adapt a little bit because you don't have a 6'6", 335 guy there. You got other really good players coming up, but Darryl's rare. Maybe Carrington in a different way could be a nose guard in certain situations. That's for Florida State to figure out with Carrington. Finally, does Carrington consistently change positions to maximize his production? This is the part that's on him. Pot Roast is a really good defensive line coach. Terrence Knight's proved that. Coach White's scheme has worked at Syracuse and at Nebraska. No offense to either one of those programs. It's easier to get talent to Florida State. The guys that he's going to have around him, if he takes to his craft and he listens to what they're saying, he can play multiple spots, not only be good at Florida State, but increase his chances of at least having an opportunity to play in the NFL. It's the hardest thing to do, and I'm not saying he's the perfect profile to do it, but there's been a lot of defensive linemen that are shorter guys that make it because of technique, effort, and being coachable. If he's that guy, why not him? Carrington has the physical tools to at least be in that conversation. And if you're going to maximize his production at Florida State, the other team not knowing where he's going to line up is a big part of it. Now, to finish up the show, I just want to give the quick notes of my conversation with John Williams discussing Jaden O'Neal and just like the mass confusion around Oklahoma quarterback recruiting, because it directly impacts the Noles. O'Neal is committed to the Oklahoma Sooners. However, Arbuckle comes over from Washington State to be the new offensive coordinator for Brent Venables and his staff. He wants his own quarterback. That's just kind of how it works. But O'Neal was already committed. Florida State's recruiting him, and he's on campus as I do this podcast. We'll see what Florida State's able to do when he gets done and he gets interviewed. But Arizona's had an official visit with him. He's going to Oklahoma this next weekend. I'm sure there are other schools still talking to him. I know Auburn has had communication with him as well. If Oklahoma gets Bo Bentley, and this is the biggest piece to the entire puzzle, I think there's a better chance that O'Neal leaves the class than stays. But according to Williams, much to my surprise, Arbuckle, the OC at Oklahoma, wants both quarterbacks. That's rare in today's game because quarterbacks transfer so much. Teams tend to stay away from two quarterback classes unless they're in dire straits because you're going to lose one of the two. It's going to happen. Jaden is a good athlete, but he's not the athlete that Bo Bentley is. He's a freaky athlete. He's out of Salina, Texas, just outside of Dallas. Get Florida State recruited too, and he can absolutely float. Like he can run. I think they would rather have him. And if it works out that way, it's a coin toss between LSU and Oklahoma. Everybody's got their opinion. I have no idea where the kid's going, but he's at Elite 11 right now. If he makes a decision in the next couple of weeks, and that's kind of the expectation, and he picks the Sooners, I'm still going with Jaden O'Neal doesn't sign with Oklahoma. John's trying to tell me, based on my conversation again, when I did the podcast on Locked On the Portal, that's something that he thinks Oklahoma's going to try to secure both. And again, he's going to Oklahoma next weekend. But by then, I'm not sure that Bo Bentley's decision will be done. The Elite 11 finals are going on. I expect him to come home, sit with his family and discuss it. And it could carry out 2-3 more weeks. Who knows? But he needs to figure that out. I would hope for him and for everybody else involved by July 4th at the latest. This year it's on a Wednesday, just for the record. But that's when that needs to come to a conclusion so everybody can have a quarterback here. Does Jaden stay with Oklahoma? Does he go to Florida State? Does he take more visits? Is Arizona a true contender? I'm sure that would be a very interesting conversation to listen to. Not that we'll ever get it between Bo and Jaden, because if they would have any opportunity to be on the same roster, they'd need to be on the same page too. But there's so much complexity to this because right now, unless something changes, Florida State is not getting another quarterback that I know of. I'm sure they're working on guys behind the scenes, but right now, Florida State quarterback recruiting is iffy. Jaden O'Neal is their best chance by far to end up with a quarterback as of today, from what I know. And again, the way recruiting works, especially at quarterback, stealth is key. No doubt about it. And they may have made contact with a junior college player. Somebody else maybe is going to hit the portal they know about. That's just how this works. It's not necessarily something that is ever going to be discussed publicly, but that's how this works. Like, you try to get somebody else's commitment. Somebody knows they're going to enter the portal, whatever it is, like they're going to graduate in December. They're going to play out their season, but they know they're not going to be the guy. And they're going to train. There's a million things that could happen for Florida State, but I'm just most interested in getting to the point where you got Kevin Sperry last year, really good player. If you can get back-to-back years with quarterbacks that you like, you can build your program. It will help Florida State when they leave the ACC, hopefully sooner than later, to become a great program again. So let's see what happens with Jaden O'Neal over the next week. Same thing with Bo Bentley, because this is a really unique recruiting situation. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. We will see you again soon here on Locked On Seminoles.